Trevor Khan, thank you for talking to me.
My pleasure.
Can you tell me why marriage equality has become such an important issue to you?
Well, it's not something that's evolved recently. I've had a view since before the amendments were made in 2004 that the previous definition of marriage under the Marriage Act allowed the opportunity for same-sex couples to be married. Obviously, the passing of the legislation in 2004 crystallised that. I was involved at the Law Society in a robust debate in around about 2007 with regards to what the Law Society's attitude should be, and I've continued on trying to encourage people to change their view.
Why do you think Australian politicians in general have been slow to come on board?
I think politicians generally are more conservative than the communities that they represent. So what you'll often find is that those politicians are older. I think it's fair to say probably old white men, and that's not necessarily entirely representative of the communities which elect them.
The National Party is often associated with rural areas, parts of Australia. What's the general feeling towards marriage equality that you're finding outside the major cities?
Look, all areas are different, and including rural and regional areas, but I think it's a mistake to look at moving outside Sydney or Wollongong and saying it's simply some rural backwater. There are large regional centres scattered throughout New South Wales and the other states. The people in those, particularly those regional centres, would have views very similar to Sydney or Melbourne. Perhaps in the smaller centres, people are more conservative in their views, but I think generally throughout Australia, and including in regional areas, there's a fundamental core principle of people being entitled to a fair go. So it's not that simply because you move out of Sydney that suddenly everyone says no. The language they use may be different, but the sentiment is the same.
What's been the general reaction within the National Party to your views on this?
Well, I went to the last pre-selection making quite plain, as they all knew, that I'd strongly advocated for marriage equality. I made it plain in terms of the pre-selection brochure that I put out and in my speech that position wouldn't change, and my pre-selectors re-pre-selected me into a winning spot. Now, whether most of them agree with me, I doubt. But the issue is not so core to their principles that they didn't re-pre-select me.
Marriage equality in Australia is seen as very much a federal issue. What influence do you think state politicians can have?
Well, we certainly tried to pass a state same-sex marriage bill, and we did that because, well, for a number of reasons. We thought if the federal government wasn't prepared to move on it, that we would try and do something at a state level. But it was also a question of waving the flag, making sure that our federal colleagues knew that they weren't going to get away with inaction. And I think since that bill was defeated by one vote, the position simply remains is that we are capable of attracting media, we're capable of attracting attention, we're capable of encouraging people to have a view. So we don't have a direct influence, but we certainly can continue to be a burr under their saddle.
You've talked in the past about how marriage is very much a conservative institution in some ways, and it should ideally appeal to conservatives. What did you mean by that?
It's quite plain that what marriage provides is a structure, and it's clearly what those who oppose marriage equality talk about as well. It provides a structure of support and love and commitment. It provides an environment for monogamy. Those are conservative values, and what marriage equality really is saying is that that we're offering the opportunity of that same institution to same-sex couples. Now, what that's essentially saying is that we are seeking to reinforce across the whole community the benefits of strong, supportive, and stable relationships. It's a perfect conservative hook.
Recent events in Ireland with the referendum have obviously provided some momentum here and elsewhere. What do you say to those who want a referendum or a plebiscite on the issue?
The Australian Constitution provides that marriage is a power that exists with the federal parliament. You can't escape your responsibilities by simply saying we'll send it to a referendum. We send people to war without it even going to a vote in the parliament. We cause people in those wars to go off and die. If we can do that, then surely our politicians can have the heart and the courage to make these decisions.
What do you say to those who oppose marriage equality on the grounds of, say, religion or cultural differences or tradition?
They're entitled to that view, but they're in the minority now. Look, 30 years ago, about 2/3 of people were married in churches, and about 1/3 had civil ceremonies. Now that the numbers are completely reversed, it's been a social revolution that's gone on extraordinarily quickly. More than 2/3 of people have civil ceremonies. The Marriage Act is about a secular civil institution. It's not a religious institution, and clearly that's the view taken by the majority of people in Australia.
Occasionally I'll hear people oppose it on the grounds that it entrenches a divide between married or unmarried couples, or that it's an outdated institution, or it's even patriarchal. What do you say to them?
They're entitled to their view. Plainly, that's been a debate that's gone on across society. It's gone across what would be 20 odd years in terms of feminist ideology, amongst others. That's a view that people are entitled to. People are entitled to make a decision as to whether they marry or not, whether they're, in my view, whether they're gay or straight. But people are entitled to make those choices. People are entitled to decide that they should be married, and at the present time, a section of our community is denied that opportunity of making that choice.
You yourself, you're married to a woman and you have 2 children. What do you say to those who are not LGBTQI, who don't identify as that? How can they get involved themselves? Can they give support?
Of course they can, and look, if you look at the numbers, what is it? Around about 70% of Australians support marriage equality. That's an extraordinary number of people, and most of those who plainly are supporting it are heterosexual and heterosexual couples. The way that people support this is to talk to their politicians, say that they are not frightened of change. Say that people in our community are entitled to a fair go, irrespective of their sexual orientation. It only takes a phone call or a letter or an email, and that's really all you can ask people to do.
And that, of course, counts for everybody, regardless of sexuality, to get in touch with your local politician and those who've got influence.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and look, everyone has a story. One of the plain things that's occurred in our community is that there is more exposure by people to either friends or family who are gay. Those stories are important for politicians to understand, that it's not only gay people that are impacted about that, it's their family and their friends. And those family and friends are entitled to share in the celebration of marriage as much as the same-sex couple themselves, and so that the impact of this denial is far wider than simply on one section of our community.
What do you think the timeline is for marriage equality?
I think that's difficult, really difficult to determine. There clearly are some interesting forces that are developing at the moment. I would hope that it's this year, but I'm becoming less and less confident of that. But what I am confident about it is that whether it's this year or next year or the year after, the dawn is coming. The dawn is coming, and nothing will stop this from occurring.
And my final question would have to be, do you think that the GLBT rights end with marriage equality, or is there more to fight for?
Look, when decriminalisation occurred, many people thought, in a sense, the struggle was over. One of the great barriers had been overcome. The answer is society evolves in a whole variety of ways. New challenges come along, there plainly are other issues. There's plainly issues with regards to the extent of some of the religious exemptions, for instance, with regards to children in schools. But I think, as a conservative politician, what you do is you concentrate on one issue at a time. You deal with this one, you see where you go after that. But I think it's a mistake if you try and get ahead of the game. You know, we're not at the point of having achieved marriage equality. So let's deal with the challenge that's in front of us.
Trevor Khan, thank you very much.
My pleasure.